The most dangerous mistake is believing you already know who deserves respect. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was already overflowing with travelers before the morning sun had fully climbed above the horizon. Families hurried toward departure gates. Business executives balanced coffee cups while answering early phone calls, and military personnel quietly blended into the endless stream of passengers crossing polished floors beneath towering glass walls. Every electronic departure board flashed destinations across the country, while overhead announcements echoed through the massive terminal with the familiar rhythm of another ordinary day. Among thousands of travelers walked a woman almost no one noticed. Angela Brooks carried a modest black travel bag over one shoulder and wore a simple charcoal blazer, dark slacks, and comfortable walking shoes. There were no medals, no decorations, no military insignia, and nothing about her appearance invited special attention. Her silver-streaked hair was neatly tied back, and her calm expression reflected years of quiet discipline rather than authority. To everyone around her, she appeared to be another middle-aged traveler trying to reach her flight on time. Yet there was something impossible to overlook if someone truly paid attention. Her posture remained perfectly balanced without seeming rigid. She acknowledged every airport employee with a warm smile and a polite greeting. She naturally stepped aside to allow an elderly couple to pass before her, then gently helped a young mother lift a heavy carry-on suitcase onto the security conveyor without waiting for thanks. The little boy standing beside his mother smiled up at her. "Thank you, ma'am," he said. Angela smiled kindly. "You are very welcome. Have a wonderful trip." She continued walking as though nothing remarkable had happened. Several nearby travelers watched the quiet exchange with appreciation before returning to their own concerns. Standing near the entrance to the security checkpoint, Officer Ryan Mitchell observed the crowd with folded arms. After more than a decade in law enforcement, he believed he could identify suspicious behavior almost instantly. Unfortunately, experience had slowly become mixed with assumptions he no longer questioned. His attention settled on Angela almost immediately. She looked composed. Too composed, he thought. She moved confidently through unfamiliar surroundings without once looking up at the signs. She carried herself with unusual certainty, and instead of interpreting those details as confidence born from experience, Ryan interpreted them as something else entirely. "Hold it right there," he called loudly across the checkpoint. Angela stopped immediately and turned toward him without hesitation. "Good morning, officer," she said with genuine courtesy. Ryan approached with measured steps, studying her face before looking briefly at the travel bag resting against her shoulder. "Where are you headed this morning?" he asked. Angela answered calmly. "Washington, District of Columbia. Business or personal?" "Official travel." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Official with who?" Angela smiled politely. "I am traveling under government authorization." Several travelers nearby glanced toward the conversation after hearing the exchange. Ryan gave a faint laugh that carried more skepticism than humor. "Government authorization. That sounds important." Angela nodded once. "It is important to the people I serve." Ryan crossed his arms. "I am going to need you to step out of line." Without the slightest sign of frustration, Angela replied, "Of course, officer." She quietly followed him toward a nearby inspection area, while curious passengers slowed their pace just enough to watch. A Transportation Security Administration officer noticed that Angela complied with every instruction before it was fully spoken. She never argued. She never questioned the process. She simply cooperated with calm confidence. Ryan placed one hand on the inspection table and looked directly at her. "You seem awfully relaxed," Angela answered. Remaining calm usually helps everyone. Ryan smiled faintly. "We will see about that." Unknown to everyone standing nearby, the woman facing him had spent decades making decisions that affected thousands of service members around the world without ever asking for recognition. She had learned long ago that true leadership did not begin with introducing yourself. It began with how you treated people when nobody knew your name. As another boarding announcement echoed across the terminal, travelers continued gathering around the edge of the inspection area, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. None of them realized that before the next half hour had passed, every assumption inside that terminal would be turned upside down, and the quiet woman standing patiently beside the inspection table would remind everyone that character always reveals itself long before rank ever needs to. Angela Brooks placed her travel bag carefully on the inspection table exactly where Officer Ryan Mitchell instructed. Her movements were steady, unhurried, and completely cooperative. She folded her hands loosely in front of her while Ryan examined her identification and boarding pass with increasing skepticism. Around them, the steady rhythm of the airport continued, but more travelers began slowing their pace as curiosity quietly spread through the security area. Some glanced only briefly before continuing toward their gates, while others lingered just long enough to wonder why such an ordinary traveler had attracted so much attention. Ryan compared the identification in his hand with Angela's face several times. Everything appeared legitimate. Her boarding pass matched her identification, and there were no visible irregularities. Even so, something about her calm demeanor continued to bother him. In his experience, people stopped for additional screening usually displayed some combination of frustration, anxiety, or impatience. Angela displayed none of those emotions. Instead, she looked entirely comfortable, almost as if waiting patiently was simply another part of her day. "You do not seem very concerned," Ryan finally remarked. Angela answered with the same measured voice. "Concern does not usually improve a situation, officer. Cooperation often does." Ryan gave a short laugh that drew the attention of several nearby passengers. "That sounds like something people practice saying." Angela simply smiled. "Perhaps experience teaches us different ways to respond." Ryan opened her travel bag carefully. Inside, everything appeared remarkably organized. Neatly folded clothing occupied one side, while a leather notebook, a hardcover book about leadership, a tablet computer, and several carefully arranged folders rested on the other. Nothing appeared unusual, yet everything reflected extraordinary discipline. Ryan lifted the notebook and noticed that every page contained precise handwritten notes in clean, consistent lettering. Dates, schedules, and observations filled each page with almost military precision. He looked back toward Angela. "You like everything organized." "Organization saves time," she replied. "Time is valuable." Before Ryan could continue, a young airport employee pushing a wheelchair approached the inspection area. An elderly veteran sitting in the chair struggled to keep his small duffel bag balanced on his lap. Without interrupting the inspection or stepping outside the designated area, Angela noticed the difficulty immediately. "Sir," she said warmly to the veteran, "your bag is slipping." The airport employee adjusted the bag before it fell. The elderly man smiled gratefully. "Thank you for noticing." Angela nodded respectfully. "I hope you enjoy your trip." The veteran studied her for a brief second. There was something familiar about her bearing that he could not quite place. Before he could think further, the employee continued pushing the wheelchair toward another gate. Ryan observed the exchange without commenting. He returned to searching the bag until he found a small velvet pouch tucked neatly beside the notebook. Opening it carefully, he discovered a simple bronze challenge coin engraved with an American eagle and an unfamiliar military crest. He turned it over in his hand. The metal was worn slightly around the edges, suggesting years of careful handling rather than decoration. "What exactly is this?" Ryan asked. Angela looked at the coin briefly. "A reminder." "A reminder of what?" Ryan asked. "Responsibility," she answered quietly. Ryan frowned. "Most people collect souvenirs. You collect responsibility." Angela's expression remained peaceful. "Some reminders are worth carrying every day." Nearby, Transportation Security Administration Supervisor Linda Foster happened to notice the challenge coin as she completed another routine inspection. Years earlier, before joining Airport Security Management, she had worked alongside federal agencies during several large emergency preparedness exercises. Although she could not immediately identify the specific insignia engraved on the coin, something about its design triggered a distant memory. She did not interrupt Ryan, but she watched more carefully from across the checkpoint. Meanwhile, another family approached the inspection lanes with two small children. One little girl looked nervous as she prepared to walk through the security scanner for the first time. Angela noticed the child's anxious expression and smiled reassuringly. "It will be over before you know it," she said gently. "You are going to do just fine." The little girl smiled back, visibly more relaxed. Her mother quietly thanked Angela before continuing through the line. Ryan looked up again. "You certainly like talking to strangers," Angela answered. "Sometimes kindness is the shortest conversation we can have." Those nearby exchanged quiet glances. There was something unusual about the woman standing beside the inspection table. She never attempted to impress anyone. She never mentioned accomplishments or demanded special treatment. Yet every word she spoke carried quiet confidence that could not easily be explained. Linda continued watching from a distance, her attention returning once more to the unfamiliar challenge coin resting in Ryan's hand. A faint feeling told her that what appeared to be an ordinary secondary inspection might soon become something very different. Officer Ryan Mitchell slowly set the bronze challenge coin back onto the inspection table, but his attention remained fixed on Angela Brooks. The quiet confidence she carried no longer seemed ordinary, yet instead of encouraging caution, it strengthened his determination to prove that his instincts were correct. Around them, the flow of passengers continued through the security checkpoint, although more curious eyes drifted toward the inspection area. Travelers whispered quietly to one another, trying to understand why an apparently cooperative woman had become the center of so much attention. Angela remained exactly where Ryan had instructed her to stand. Her posture never shifted. Her breathing remained calm. She watched the activity around the terminal with the same composed expression she had worn since the moment she entered the checkpoint. She appeared neither intimidated nor impatient. She simply waited. Ryan folded his arms. "You said you were traveling on official government business." Angela nodded. "Yes." "Then tell me exactly which agency." She answered without hesitation. "I am not authorized to discuss operational details in a public setting." Ryan smiled as though he had finally found the answer he expected. "Convenient." Angela looked directly at him. "Some responsibilities require discretion. That applies to many public servants." Ryan glanced towards several nearby passengers before speaking louder than necessary. "You expect people to believe that?" The increased volume immediately drew more attention. Several travelers stopped near the seating area, overlooking the checkpoint. A businessman lowered his phone after ending a call. A college student quietly removed one earbud. A family waiting to enter the next screening lane exchanged uncertain looks. Angela did not react to the growing audience. "Officer," she said calmly, "I understand you have responsibilities to perform. I have no objection to lawful procedures." Ryan leaned slightly closer. "Then you will not mind waiting a little longer." "If that is your decision," Angela replied. Ryan picked up her identification once more. Everything continued matching the information displayed on his computer terminal. There were no warrants, no alerts, no travel restrictions, and no security concerns. The clean record only deepened his frustration because it offered no explanation for the unusual confidence standing in front of him. Across the checkpoint, Linda Foster quietly approached another Transportation Security Administration supervisor. Without taking her eyes off the inspection area, she spoke in a low voice. "Can you cover my station for a moment?" "Everything all right?" the supervisor asked. Linda nodded slowly. "Probably. I just want to verify something." She walked toward a nearby operations desk where secure reference materials and agency directories could be accessed by authorized personnel. Before sitting down, she looked once more toward Angela and noticed another detail she had overlooked earlier. Angela was wearing a simple wristwatch with a worn leather band. It was not expensive or decorative, but the watch face displayed military time instead of the standard 12-hour format used by most civilians. Linda paused for a second. Alone, the detail meant very little. Combined with the challenge coin, the disciplined posture, and the careful choice of words, it painted a picture she could not ignore. Back at the inspection table, Ryan continued asking questions. "How often do you travel?" "As required." "Where were you last week?" "Working." "Doing what?" Angela answered politely. "Fulfilling my responsibilities." Ryan exhaled slowly. "You really do not give direct answers." Angela smiled gently. "I answer every question I am permitted to answer." Nearby, the elderly veteran from earlier had finished passing through security. Before heading toward his gate, he glanced once more toward Angela. Something finally clicked in his memory. It was not recognition of her face, but recognition of the unmistakable bearing carried only by someone who had spent decades leading others under enormous responsibility. He quietly removed his veteran's cap for a brief moment as a gesture of respect before placing it back on his head and continuing toward his departure gate without saying a word. Angela noticed the gesture and returned a small nod. Ryan completely missed the silent exchange. Linda sat down at the operations terminal and entered several reference codes connected to the unfamiliar insignia she had seen on the challenge coin. The secure database required additional authorization before revealing any details, but one unexpected notification appeared almost immediately. Instead of identifying the object directly, the system displayed a simple advisory message. Specialized credentials required. Contact designated federal liaison before proceeding. Linda stared at the screen for several silent seconds. In years of airport security management, she had encountered unusual travel documents, protected identities, and classified transportation requests, but she had almost never seen that advisory. She slowly reached for the secure communication phone resting beside the keyboard. As her hand hovered over the receiver, she looked back toward the inspection area, where Angela continued standing with quiet dignity, while Ryan remained convinced he was questioning an ordinary traveler, completely unaware that the next phone call might change everything inside the terminal. Linda Foster lifted the secure phone and entered a verification code that only airport operations supervisors could access. The line connected almost immediately to a federal liaison office responsible for handling protected government travel. She kept her voice calm and professional. "This is Linda Foster with Airport Security Operations. I need assistance verifying a restricted travel indicator associated with a government passenger." The representative requested the reference number displayed on her screen. Linda carefully read every character exactly as it appeared. Several seconds of silence followed before the representative responded in a noticeably different tone. "Please remain on the line." Linda waited. She had expected additional questions, but instead she heard quiet voices in the background and the unmistakable sound of the call being transferred through multiple secure channels. Meanwhile, only a short distance away, Officer Ryan Mitchell remained convinced he was uncovering inconsistencies. He looked once again through Angela Brooks's neatly organized travel bag. Every item seemed ordinary. The folded clothing was practical rather than expensive. The tablet computer required secure authentication before opening. The notebook contained nothing except carefully written schedules and personal reminders. There was not a single unnecessary item inside the bag. Ryan frowned. "You travel very light." Angela answered with her usual calm. "Carrying only what you need makes every journey easier." Ryan looked up. "That sounds rehearsed." Angela smiled gently. "It sounds experienced." A few nearby travelers quietly exchanged amused looks after hearing her response. There was no sarcasm in her voice, only quiet confidence. Instead of becoming defensive, she answered every question with patience that somehow made the growing tension even more noticeable. A young Transportation Security Administration officer approached Ryan. "Officer Mitchell, do you need additional assistance?" Ryan shook his head. "No, I have everything under control." The young officer nodded and stepped away, although he briefly glanced toward Angela with growing curiosity. He had watched hundreds of secondary inspections during his career. Very few passengers remained this composed after such a long delay. Angela shifted her attention toward the large windows overlooking the airport runways. Outside, aircraft slowly taxied beneath the bright Georgia morning sky, while baggage vehicles crossed the concrete ramps with practiced precision. She checked the time on her watch, but displayed no sign of frustration despite knowing her scheduled departure was approaching. Ryan noticed the glance. "Are you worried about missing your flight now?" Angela answered honestly. "Everyone prefers to arrive on time. You could have avoided this delay." Angela met his eyes. "By doing what differently?" Ryan hesitated for a moment before replying, answering questions more clearly. Angela spoke with quiet sincerity. "I have answered every question truthfully. There is a difference between refusing to answer and protecting information that is not mine to share." Ryan folded his arms again. "That sounds like another carefully prepared statement." Angela simply nodded once. Discipline often sounds repetitive. Across the operations office, Linda finally heard a new voice on the secure line. It belonged to a senior federal coordinator whose calm tone immediately signaled that the matter had become more significant than a routine verification. "Supervisor Foster, thank you for contacting us before taking further action. I need you to answer one question. Is the traveler cooperative?" Linda replied without hesitation. "Completely cooperative. Respectful from the beginning." There was another brief pause. "Has anyone attempted to access restricted electronic devices or classified materials?" "No. Everything remains secured." Very good. Please do not disclose any additional information. We are initiating the appropriate notification process. Linda's heartbeat quickened slightly. Should I release the traveler? The coordinator answered carefully. Maintain a respectful delay if necessary for operational reasons, but do not escalate the situation. Additional authorized personnel are being notified. Before ending the call, he added one final sentence. Thank you for recognizing the verification indicator instead of making assumptions. Linda slowly placed the receiver back into its cradle. She stared at the silent phone for several moments before looking through the office window toward the inspection area. Her concern was no longer about the traveler. It was about everything unfolding around her. Back at the checkpoint, Ryan still believed he was directing an ordinary inspection. He returned Angela's notebook to her bag and picked up the bronze challenge coin once more. This time he noticed a tiny inscription engraved along its outer edge. It was almost impossible to read without holding it directly beneath the overhead lights. He narrowed his eyes and slowly sounded out the words. Honor does not announce itself. He looked toward Angela. Interesting message. Angela answered softly. The best lessons usually are. Neither of them realized that somewhere far beyond the terminal, a chain of official notifications had already begun moving through government offices, and each passing minute brought the airport closer to a moment that none of the watching travelers could possibly imagine. The departure board quietly updated above the terminal, and Angela Brooks noticed that boarding for her scheduled flight would begin in only a few minutes. She did not mention it. She simply stood beside the inspection table with the same calm patience she had shown since Officer Ryan Mitchell first stopped her. Ryan glanced toward the boarding screen before returning his attention to Angela. Looks like your flight is about to board. Angela nodded once. Yes, it is. You understand that you might miss it. I understand that possibility. Ryan studied her face, almost expecting frustration to appear for the first time. Instead, she remained composed. You are taking this surprisingly well, he said. Angela answered, some schedules can be changed. Character should not. Her reply lingered in the silence. Several nearby travelers exchanged thoughtful looks, sensing that this conversation had become about something much larger than a delayed flight. Ryan, however, interpreted her calm confidence as another reason to continue. I am not satisfied yet, he said. Until I know exactly who you are and why you are traveling, you will remain here. Angela inclined her head respectfully. That decision is yours to make. Across the operations office, Linda Foster stepped away from the secure communications desk with a growing sense of urgency. The federal coordinator's instructions echoed in her mind. Do not escalate the situation. Additional authorized personnel are being notified. Linda understood enough to realize that whatever was happening extended far beyond routine airport security. She walked directly toward the checkpoint, stopping beside Ryan without interrupting him in front of the gathering crowd. Officer Mitchell, she said quietly, may I speak with you for a moment? Ryan looked at her briefly but remained focused on Angela. Can it wait? Linda answered carefully. I believe this matter deserves additional coordination. Ryan shook his head. I have everything under control. Linda maintained her professional tone. I understand. I only recommend that we verify a few details before making further decisions. Ryan smiled politely, but his confidence remained unchanged. Verification is exactly what I am doing. Linda looked toward Angela, who returned a calm, respectful nod without saying a word. There was no trace of resentment in her expression. That quiet dignity only deepened Linda's concern. She stepped back, deciding not to challenge Ryan publicly. Instead, she discreetly sent a brief secure message through her operations tablet confirming that the traveler remained cooperative and that the inspection was continuing. Less than 30 seconds later, her device vibrated softly. The response contained only one sentence. Maintain current status. Authorized representatives are en route. Linda read the message twice. En route. That meant people were already traveling to the airport specifically because of the woman standing only a few yards away. Ryan continued reviewing Angela's identification for what seemed like the fifth time. Every database returned the same result. Valid identification. Valid boarding credentials. No warrants. No alerts. No travel restrictions. Nothing justified holding her except his own unresolved suspicion. Even he could sense that the facts refused to support his conclusions. Yet instead of reconsidering those conclusions, He convinced himself that the truth simply had not been uncovered yet. Nearby, the young Transportation Security Administration officer quietly approached Linda. "Supervisor, is everything all right?" Linda answered softly. "Continue normal operations. Keep the checkpoint moving." "Is the passenger dangerous?" the officer whispered. Linda looked directly at Angela before replying. "No, that is not my concern." The young officer followed her gaze. Angela stood with perfect composure, occasionally offering reassuring smiles to travelers passing nearby who looked uncertain about the situation unfolding before them. One elderly woman accidentally dropped a boarding pass while walking past the inspection area. Angela bent down, picked it up, and politely handed it back. "Thank you, dear," the woman said warmly. "You are very welcome," Angela replied. Ryan watched the exchange, but said nothing. Deep inside, a small voice began asking questions he had ignored until now. Why would someone under pressure remain so consistently thoughtful toward complete strangers? Why had every interaction revealed patience instead of irritation? Why had the secure verification triggered such an unusual federal response? Before he could answer those questions, a quiet notification appeared on the airport operations display mounted above the checkpoint. Linda noticed it immediately. A secure access request had just been approved for a government arrival team entering the airport through a restricted entrance normally reserved for senior federal officials. She slowly looked toward the terminal windows facing the executive vehicle entrance outside. In the distance, several dark government vehicles had just turned onto the airport access road. Their arrival was still unnoticed by most people inside the terminal, but Linda understood exactly what it meant. The waiting was almost over, and within minutes the assumptions guiding every decision inside that checkpoint were about to be tested against a truth that could no longer remain hidden. The atmosphere inside the terminal changed so gradually that most travelers did not notice it at first. Airport operations continued as usual. Boarding announcements echoed through the concourse. Rolling suitcases clicked across polished floors. Children laughed while families searched for their departure gates. Yet beneath that familiar rhythm, an entirely different sequence of events had quietly begun. Outside the terminal, 3 dark government vehicles entered through a restricted access lane reserved for authorized federal personnel. Airport security officers stationed at the entrance immediately verified the electronic credentials transmitted from the approaching convoy. Within seconds, the access barriers opened without delay. Inside the operations center, Linda Foster watched the security monitor displaying the restricted entrance. Her heartbeat remained steady, but her thoughts raced. The secure notification she had received minutes earlier had not exaggerated the situation. Whoever was arriving possessed authorization that bypassed nearly every normal airport protocol. Linda quietly informed the airport director that the expected federal representatives had arrived. The director looked toward the live security feed, adjusted his jacket, and immediately walked toward the executive reception corridor without asking further questions. At the inspection area, Officer Ryan Mitchell remained unaware of everything unfolding beyond the public terminal. He looked once again at Angela Brooks before checking the time displayed on his wristwatch. "Your boarding door has probably closed by now," he remarked. Angela answered without disappointment. "There will always be another flight." Ryan searched her expression for frustration and found none. "You have been delayed for almost 40 minutes. Sometimes patience accomplishes more than urgency," Angela replied. Her voice remained warm, respectful, and completely controlled. Ryan slowly exhaled. Most people would be demanding answers by now. Angela smiled gently. Demanding answers and discovering truth are rarely the same thing. Several nearby travelers quietly reflected on her words. A businessman who had remained nearby during the inspection lowered his newspaper. A flight attendant waiting for an employee shuttle glanced toward Angela with growing admiration. Even the young Transportation Security Administration officer who had assisted earlier seemed increasingly uncomfortable with how long the inspection had continued despite the absence of any evidence suggesting wrongdoing. Ryan finally closed Angela's travel bag and placed it neatly on the inspection table. Every item had been examined. Every document had been verified. Every database search had returned clear results. Yet he still hesitated to conclude the encounter. Something inside him resisted accepting that his original assumptions might have been incorrect. At that exact moment, Linda returned to the checkpoint accompanied by the airport director. Their expressions remained professional, but noticeably more serious than before. Ryan noticed them approaching. "Everything all right?" he asked. The airport director answered calmly. "Officer Mitchell, we have received notice that additional federal personnel are arriving regarding this traveler." Ryan looked surprised. "Regarding her?" "Yes." Ryan glanced briefly toward Angela before turning back. "Who requested them?" The director chose his words carefully. "The request originated through authorized government channels." Ryan frowned. "Then I definitely need to continue verifying everything." Linda spoke quietly. "Officer Mitchell, all available records have already been verified." Ryan answered confidently. "Then there is no problem with waiting a little longer." Angela remained silent throughout the exchange. She neither interrupted nor attempted to influence the discussion. Her attention drifted briefly toward the terminal entrance, almost as though she sensed exactly what was happening outside without needing anyone to tell her. A few moments later, the automatic doors at the far end of the concourse opened. Several individuals wearing dark business attire entered the terminal with calm, purposeful movements. None displayed urgency. None raised their voices. They simply walked together with the quiet confidence of people accustomed to responsibility. Airport employees immediately recognized that these visitors possessed high-level federal credentials. Security personnel respectfully stepped aside after quick visual verification. Conversations throughout the nearby terminal gradually faded as more travelers noticed the unusual delegation approaching the checkpoint. Ryan followed the direction of everyone's attention. "Who are they?" he asked softly. Linda answered honestly. "I do not know their names." The airport director added, "But I know they did not come here by accident." The group continued walking through the terminal without hesitation, their eyes focused on only one destination. Angela stood exactly where she had been standing since the inspection began, her hands resting calmly in front of her, showing neither anticipation nor surprise. To everyone watching, it seemed almost impossible that the quiet woman who had spent the last 40 minutes patiently answering questions without complaint could somehow be connected to the distinguished officials now approaching through the center of one of the busiest airports in America. Within only a few more steps, every unanswered question inside the terminal would begin finding its answer, and every assumption made since that ordinary morning inspection started would face a truth that no longer needed to remain hidden. The distinguished delegation crossed the terminal with quiet confidence, drawing respectful glances from airport employees who immediately recognized the significance of their official credentials even if they did not recognize every face. Their measured pace never quickened. They did not appear alarmed. They appeared certain. Conversations around the checkpoint gradually faded until only the familiar airport announcements echoed through the vast terminal. Officer Ryan Mitchell instinctively straightened his posture as the group approached. The airport director stepped forward first, prepared to greet the visitors. But before he could speak, the senior official at the front of the delegation politely acknowledged him with a brief nod and continued walking without slowing. His destination was unmistakable. He stopped directly in front of Angela Brooks. For a brief moment, complete silence settled over the inspection area. Then the distinguished officer smiled with genuine respect. "Good morning, General Brooks," he said clearly. "I apologize for the unexpected delay. We appreciate your patience." Angela returned the smile with quiet warmth. "Good morning, General Michael Reynolds. There is no need for an apology. Everyone here has been carrying out responsibilities as they understood them." General Reynolds nodded respectfully before offering a crisp military salute. Angela returned the salute with effortless precision. The movement was graceful, disciplined, and unmistakably familiar to every veteran watching nearby. The elderly veteran who had paused earlier quietly removed his cap once again, his expression filled with admiration. Several active duty service members waiting for flights instinctively stood a little straighter as they recognized the significance of the exchange. Ryan remained completely still. He looked from Angela to General Reynolds and back again, struggling to reconcile what he was witnessing with everything he had believed only moments earlier. "General," he repeated softly, almost to himself. General Reynolds turned toward Ryan with a calm professional expression. "Officer, allow me to formally introduce General Angela Brooks, United States Army, Star General." Ryan stared in disbelief. Angela had never once claimed special treatment. She had never announced her rank. She had never corrected anyone by appealing to authority. Every opportunity to reveal her identity had existed, yet she had chosen restraint instead. Linda Foster quietly exhaled as the final pieces fell into place. The unusual challenge coin, the military bearing, the protected verification indicator, the secure federal response. Everything suddenly made perfect sense. General Reynolds continued speaking. General Brooks has been traveling under a restricted administrative protocol connected to official government responsibilities. Certain travel details were intentionally limited for operational security. Ryan slowly lowered his eyes toward the inspection table where Angela's neatly packed travel bag still rested. The simple notebook, the modest clothing, the worn challenge coin, and the ordinary appearance that had led him to so many assumptions suddenly looked very different. General Reynolds glanced toward Angela. Your transportation has been adjusted. Another aircraft has been coordinated to accommodate today's schedule. Angela nodded appreciatively. Thank you. I know many people have worked hard to make that possible. Even now, she acknowledged the efforts of others before mentioning herself. One of the federal representatives stepped forward carrying a slim leather portfolio. General, your updated travel documents are ready whenever you are. Angela accepted them with a quiet smile. Thank you. Around the checkpoint, travelers watched in respectful silence. Some exchanged astonished glances. Others simply reflected on how completely appearances had misled them. The businessman who had observed the inspection folded his newspaper beneath one arm. The young mother Angela had helped earlier gently squeezed her son's hand. The little boy whispered, "She was important the whole time." His mother smiled softly. "Yes," she replied. But she acted kind before anyone knew. Those simple words seemed to capture everything the terminal had just witnessed. Ryan finally found his voice. General Brooks. His sentence faded before reaching completion. Angela looked at him with the same calm expression she had maintained from the beginning. There was no satisfaction in proving him wrong. No anger. No resentment. Only quiet dignity. General Reynolds observed the exchange without interruption. He understood that some lessons carried greater weight when allowed to unfold naturally. The inspection table, once the center of suspicion, had quietly become the place where every assumption had been overturned, not by confrontation, but by truth patiently revealing itself one careful step at a time. Officer Ryan Mitchell stood motionless as the significance of the moment settled over the entire terminal. Only minutes earlier, he had believed he was questioning an ordinary traveler. Now he found himself standing before one of the highest-ranking officers in the United States Army, a leader who had never once used her position to demand respect. The silence around the inspection area seemed almost as powerful as the revelation itself. General Michael Reynolds turned calmly toward the airport director and Linda Foster. Thank you both for following proper verification procedures. Operational security exists for a reason, and your professionalism helped protect that process. Linda nodded respectfully. We only wanted to make certain we handled the situation correctly. General Reynolds smiled. That commitment matters. The airport director acknowledged the statement with quiet appreciation before looking toward Ryan. He did not speak immediately. There was no need to embarrass anyone in front of the growing crowd. The facts were already visible to everyone present. Ryan slowly looked at Angela Brooks. General Brooks, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions before I understood the situation, and I allowed those assumptions to shape my decisions. I should have treated you with greater fairness and respect. Every nearby traveler listened carefully. Angela did not answer immediately. Instead, she allowed a brief moment of silence to pass before speaking with the same calm voice she had used since the beginning of the encounter. Officer Mitchell, accountability begins when we are willing to examine our own decisions honestly. That is true for every profession, including mine. Ryan lowered his eyes. I understand. Angela continued gently. Authority carries responsibility. Every interaction with another person is an opportunity either to strengthen trust or to weaken it. The choice belongs to us every single time. Her words carried no anger and no triumph. They sounded less like a correction and more like a lesson offered with sincere hope that it would be remembered. General Reynolds glanced toward the airport director. The Army is not requesting special treatment regarding today's events. We simply expect the same professional standards that apply to every member of public service. The director nodded immediately. That is exactly how this will be handled. He turned toward Ryan with a measured expression. Officer Mitchell, effective immediately. Another supervisor will complete this assignment while the circumstances surrounding today's interaction are reviewed through normal administrative procedures. Ryan accepted the decision without argument. Yes, sir. He carefully removed the inspection documents from his hands and passed them to another officer who had quietly arrived to assist. There was no dramatic confrontation, no raised voices, only the quiet recognition that responsibility sometimes required difficult reflection. Several travelers who had witnessed the entire encounter exchanged thoughtful glances. The businessman who had observed the inspection from the beginning quietly said to the woman beside him, "She never once mentioned who she was." The woman nodded. She did not need to. Nearby, the elderly veteran smiled with quiet pride. That is exactly what real leadership looks like. Angela heard the comment and acknowledged him with a respectful nod. General Reynolds then looked toward Angela. "General, transportation is ready whenever you are." Angela smiled. "Before we leave, I would like to thank the airport staff." She turned toward Linda Foster first. "Supervisor Foster, thank you for remaining thoughtful throughout this process." Linda answered sincerely. "Thank you, General. I learned something important today." Angela then looked toward the young Transportation Security Administration officer who had quietly assisted earlier. "Please continue treating every traveler with professionalism. Small moments often matter more than we realize." The young officer smiled proudly. "Yes, General." Finally, Angela turned back toward Ryan. "Officer Mitchell, I hope today's experience becomes something valuable for you. Every day gives us another opportunity to improve how we serve others." Ryan met her eyes for the first time since learning her identity. "I will remember that." There was genuine sincerity in his voice. Angela simply nodded. She neither accepted nor rejected the apology with dramatic words. She chose something more powerful. She allowed accountability to begin with reflection rather than humiliation. As the federal delegation prepared to escort her from the inspection area, many of the travelers who had witnessed the entire encounter quietly stepped aside, not because they had just discovered her rank, but because they had come to recognize the extraordinary character she had demonstrated long before anyone knew her title. Angela Brooks accepted her travel bag from the inspection table with the same quiet grace she had shown from the moment she entered the terminal. She adjusted the strap over her shoulder, thanked the airport staff with a warm smile, and began walking alongside General Michael Reynolds and the federal delegation. No one rushed ahead of her. No one attempted to draw attention to her presence. Even surrounded by senior officials, she carried herself exactly as she had before anyone knew her identity. The difference was not in her character. The difference was in how everyone else now saw her. Travelers naturally stepped aside as she passed, not because anyone ordered them to, but because respect had quietly replaced curiosity. The young mother Angela had helped earlier smiled as their eyes met one final time. Her little boy waved enthusiastically. Angela returned the wave with genuine warmth before continuing toward the executive exit. The elderly veteran stood near his departure gate with one hand resting over his heart. Angela acknowledged him with a respectful nod that required no words. Both understood the meaning behind the simple gesture. It was respect freely given and quietly received. Back at the inspection area, Officer Ryan Mitchell remained standing beside the now empty inspection table. The conversations around him gradually returned to normal as passengers resumed their journeys, yet the events of the morning refused to leave his thoughts. For the first time in many years, he replayed every decision he had made from the beginning of the encounter. He remembered Angela greeting him politely before he had even spoken to her. He remembered her helping strangers while she herself was being delayed. He remembered every opportunity she had to become angry, every opportunity she had to announce her rank, every opportunity she had to demand special treatment. She had chosen none of them. Instead, she had relied entirely on patience, dignity, and truth. Ryan slowly looked toward the bronze challenge coin that still rested briefly in his memory. The inscription returned to him with surprising clarity. Honor does not announce itself. Only now did he fully understand those words. Linda Foster approached him quietly. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "I kept looking for proof that supported my first impression." Linda nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the hardest evidence to recognize is the evidence that challenges our assumptions. Ryan sighed softly. She gave me every chance to reconsider. She did, Linda replied. And she never stopped treating you with respect. Those words settled deeply. Ryan understood that the greatest lesson of the day had not come from discovering Angela's rank. It had come from witnessing the difference between authority and character. One depended on position. The other existed regardless of title. Across the terminal, General Reynolds and the federal delegation escorted Angela through a restricted corridor leading toward the waiting transportation arranged for her updated schedule. Before entering the secured exit, Angela paused briefly beside the large windows overlooking the runways. Aircraft continued arriving and departing with steady precision beneath the bright morning sky. The airport had already returned to its familiar rhythm, carrying thousands of people toward destinations known only to them. She smiled quietly, knowing that the most meaningful victories were rarely the loudest ones. General Reynolds noticed her thoughtful expression. "Quite a morning," he said with a gentle smile. Angela nodded. "Every day reminds us that leadership begins long before anyone recognizes it." Reynolds smiled in agreement. And sometimes the strongest lesson is the one taught without raising your voice. Together they continued through the secure exit as the automatic doors closed behind them. Back inside the terminal, passengers resumed their conversations, flights continued boarding, and announcements echoed through the building exactly as they had before the morning began. Yet for those who had witnessed the encounter from beginning to end, something had changed. They had seen how quickly appearances could shape judgment, how quietly integrity could reveal itself, and how genuine leadership required neither recognition nor applause. Long after the terminal returned to its ordinary routine, one lesson remained with everyone who had been there that morning. Rank may be hidden, titles may remain unknown, uniforms may be left behind, but character has a way of revealing itself long before introductions are ever made. And the people who carry true honor never need to announce who they are, because the way they treat others will always speak first.